Good afternoon and welcome to the Human Rights Committee of Council regular meeting agenda for April 10, 2025. I would like to acknowledge that we are on Treaty 1 territory, the home and traditional lands of the Anishinaabe, Innu, and Dakota people, and in the national homeland of the Red River Métis. Our drinking water comes from Shoal Lake 40 First Nation in Treaty 3 territory. And in recognition of Ayodele, who I believe to be in Nigeria, I would like to acknowledge the Indigenous peoples of Nigeria and emphasize the continued struggle for justice and land rights there. We'll need a motion to confirm the minutes of the previous agenda. So moved by Kara. All those in favor? Any opposed? I believe that was carried unanimously. Thank you very much.
We'll also need a motion for the remote participants.
And we'll need a motion for the remote participants. Can I have a motion perhaps from Angie? Any discussion? All those in favor? Any opposed?
Sorry, why do we need a motion for the remote participants? It's Phyllis here.
It's part of our bylaws.
It's part of our bylaws in procedural bylaws of council because we're a committee of council and it's a formal meeting. We require a motion for remote participation.
Thank you. Thank you.
Okay, all those in favor? That was carried unanimously. Welcome, Reese Malone. The first report on the agenda is an update on the terms of reference review. There is an attachment and I want to thank all those that participated in the terms of reference. Would you like a brief summary, committee? Go ahead. Ali's here to give us a summary. Ali Raposo, everybody. And with me is Dave Clark. The terms of reference review is attached to the document. I was going to put Ali on the spot here. Essentially, the terms of reference was reviewed by a few people, not the whole of the committee necessarily. There were some changes suggested. At this time, if we could have a mover to receive it as information, I don't think the changes are significant enough to support moving to council with them. Some of them were typographical. I think the intention of the committee would be to have a fulsome review where everyone participates and to also, which we will do through the course of this year. So if someone is comfortable to move a motion, is that you, Ayodele? Is there any discussion? If not, I'll call the question to receive as information moved by Ayodele. All those in favor? Any opposed? Okay, we'll move on to item number 2, update on demonstrations against 2S LGBT children's rights and freedoms. Attached to the agenda item is Appendix A. It is an appendix that was created to summarize what I would think fairly is a couple of years worth of work if one were to take it on. And so I was hoping to have a brief discussion about plans and priorities, and then discuss with you a motion for its consideration in one of the subcommittees of the Human Rights Committee and send it on its way. The agenda here is really to consider some of the work that we're going to be doing in the next year. And this for sure comes to us and has been on the plate for the Human Rights Committee for some time. I broke it, the document breaks what had been a motion into some distinct work themes like policy and legislation, infrastructure and public spaces, safety and hate initiatives, and more. There are some work underway that I think it would be valuable for the public service, or certainly the components of the housing committee. For instance, one of the agenda items here in under item number 4, housing and community services, calls the Human Rights Committee to look at supportive housing, culturally appropriate housing, and 24/7 safe spaces for 2S LGBTQ plus people. And I think that it's best to sort of start with a really good briefing on, you know, where that's at. And certainly there have been projects in the city of Winnipeg and continues to be on that. So would you like an introduction? I think there are several of you that were involved in this work and can speak to a path where we move some of these items to the the subcommittee. Phyllis, did you have your hand up and wish to comment, or Ron?
Sorry, I was just saying yes, the introduction. Yes, to the offer of the introduction.
Okay,
Thank you.
Yeah, same here.
so did you want to start with the subcommittee when you were on the subcommittee? Would members of the subcommittee like to discuss the work and repositioning, and your comfort with repositioning some of your work along the lines? When I look at this, I see about a 2-year work project. But would you like to talk about some of those?
Yeah, do we want to just identify which items you're wanting to go to which subcommittees, or are we wanting to identify what we've already discussed, or?
I think perhaps starting with column A, looking at the summative document. My thoughts are we move the summative document to the subcommittee, and then put it on the agenda for the next meeting. Once you can look at what work plan you have, I think it's in its totality. There are some things that are completely out of scope. For instance, of a subcommittee, the human resource priorities identified. I will endeavor to talk to Mr. Clark, who's here with us today, on the referrals and what is either already in place. And then if we could bring it back to the Human Rights Committee with, you know, some, not all of it potentially, because we work in year increments. You know, we can work in multi-year increments too, but you know, what is a sizable chunk that the subcommittee might be interested in, and then bring it back next, you know, in a subsequent meeting. We can put it on the agenda when the subcommittee is ready. Bring it back for an update to the Human Rights Committee.
Yep.
Does that sound good?
Yes.
Anybody have thoughts on something more different? All right, if someone's prepared to move that the summative document is referred to the subcommittee. The Equity Diversity Subcommittee, sorry, I just called it the subcommittee. We have two, we have access and we have equity and diversity. Okay, Cara moves that the summative document goes to referral. Any discussion? All those in favor? Any opposed? That was carried unanimously. The 2024 Human Rights Committee of Council Annual Report. I will I believe there was an item that was sent to the clerks
Not
for
for
the
the,
committee's consideration?
not for the annual report.
Oh,
It's still with Ross with the last bit.
okay. Sorry, I thought we had the annual report, so we'll need to move this item to the next agenda then. I can circulate the draft in the meantime to the next meeting, but we have a gorgeous annual report and I want to recognize and thank the efforts of former committee chair and committee coordinator Ali in writing, and all of the public service, in fact, for contributing to the 2024 annual report. I'd like to thank, Deputy Mayor Marcus Chambers, whose work is featured in that report, as is the work of the public service. And I want to thank you very much for crafting it. I think you'll be proud of the look. I think it's pretty. But if we could get a motion to move to the next meeting of the Human Rights Committee for the annual report. So moved by Angie, and I think Ayu Deli also had his hand up. All those in favor? Any opposed? All right, that item will be on the next agenda of the Human Rights Committee. 2024 budget review and routine budget update.
Both are attached, if there's any questions or anything like that.
I hope everyone had an opportunity to review it. It is basically what the committee did last year. The bulk of the budget is in and around the contractor and office operations, with some meaningful budget that went to some in towards some grants. If there's any questions, if not, we'll need a mover to move this to receive the budget for 2024. Merci, Dennis. Any discussion? All those in favor? Any opposed? I believe that too was carried unanimously. Moving on to the 2025 Human Rights Committee of Council annual budget. The budget was to be attached.
We didn't get it in time for the agenda posting, but we just have a copy.
Okay, we do have a paper copy. We'll send those that are online to a copy of the budget right away. And if I may, and I'll just turn to the clerks, I think it would be somewhat easier to speak to the Human Rights Committee of Council preliminary work plan and appendix prior to this item. And so if we can send the folks participating online the budget, and we'll need a motion to rejig the agenda bit. Can we do that in situ?
Yes.
While they're reviewing the budget? Because I appreciate you're getting it right now.
Yes.
So I wouldn't feel comfortable moving something or while you're simultaneously reviewing it. So I'm going to just ask for a motion if we can move up item number 8 and item number 9 above the budget, the contract, and the updates from Accessibility and Inclusion Committee. I'd actually like to move the coordinator contract to the last agenda items, because we'll say goodbye to Ali for a few minutes while we do that, and then welcome her back just to adjourn, as is sort of the custom. Can we have a motion to just rejig the agenda so you have more time to review? It's very fair for those of you that are online receiving it. If Ayu Deli, are you willing to move? Okay. Thank you. All those in favor? Thank you. Any opposed? All right. So we'll move on to the preliminary work plan, which is item number 8. And again, I want to thank all the volunteers that really supported the Cafe Conversation event. that created essentially the document advancing Winnipeg as a human rights city. We had a work plan, of course, like we have a work plan. It's a 3-year work plan that you'll be familiar with that Tracy wrote and the committee approved. And this just provides, I think, a bit of an increased focus in the priorities. Has everyone had a chance to review it and is super psyched to, kind of dive deeper next time we get together in activities that are aligned with the priorities and the priorities and plans that were generated from that January 14th event? I know it's the end of the day, but I'll open it up for discussion if you'd like. No? Is there a mover? Did someone want to state a passionate motion in favor of the report or against it? Okay. Well, the motion would be to, receive his information, and we'll know that it is guiding the work that we're doing in the Human Rights Committee. And then, of course, the next meeting, I anticipate having more finely detailed activities aligned with this. We know, for instance, that everybody they wanted more cafe conversations. They want more dialogue about human rights, and that was evidence. They want us to be a hub and a bridge, and that work on low-hanging fruit. And Doug, if you're listening, the activity that's planned with emergency management in the Duck community is something that I think we can update the committee on. The work of the subcommittees become a bit more clarified too, I think, with some of the activities mentioned. So while the activities are not necessarily in this document, what is clear is it seems to matter for the people who attended as much that we're producing the human rights outcomes aligned in those human rights priorities, but also that we're cognizant of how we work as a Human Rights Committee of Council. And so already we've had some success getting referrals from counselors. Already, there's materials to brief council with and the community. So I'm very proud of the organizers of the Cafe Conversation event, and I'm excited about the preliminary work plan. So moved by Cara. All those in favor? All right, that was unanimous. How about we move to the updates from the Accessibility Inclusion Subcommittee?
So I can proceed as chair. Not much of an update other than we met in the fall last and then got pretty busy with actually several members of the subcommittee were on the Cafe Convo working group. So that kind of took a lot of our efforts. Decided to press pause over the holidays, December, and then our next meeting is April 28th, where we'll regroup and talk about priorities moving forward. The focus mostly of the Accessibility Inclusion Subcommittee has been around 3 main areas: transportation, communication, and the built environment. So I suspect that those will very likely be the 3 big areas that will move us, bring us forward and be the bulk of what our focus is. So it'll be good to regroup in a couple of weeks, 3 weeks, 2 weeks, and then know the kind of the course for the rest of 2025.
There was such impressive work that happened. I know that there's a briefing note being formed for the committee's consideration on some of the activities of the committee. And I think, it's difficult to respond to a verbal report sometimes, so it's good to, I'm looking forward to and what you don't know maybe is that Angie approved briefing note recently.
I guess
To
I
get
should.
on, and we're trying to put the structures in place to gain the momentum we need to advance the work in the subcommittees, and then also how to structure that report so that the Human Rights Committee of Council can see and know what's coming next from the subcommittees that report up and through the Human Rights Committee of Council. So if is there any further updates from the subcommittees? If not, we'll need a motion to receive the update, the verbal report update as information.
I'll just say that we do have a new chair of the Equity and Diversity Subcommittee, and it's Karen McCaskill.
That's exciting.
And she will be the chair for the year ahead.
Yeah.
And I suspect for the subcommittee for the accessibility and inclusion that we'll have a more fulsome update at the next HRCC meeting, because we'll really be diving in at that point.
Any further discussion on the work of the subcommittees? If somebody wants to move it with thanks. Mover.
So moved.
So moved by Councillor Chambers. All those in favor?
Aye.
Great, that was carried unanimously. We'll move on to the costs for engagement and adoption of a new accessibility icon. There's an attachment and there is an update, and I want to welcome Adam to the table.
Hello, my name is Adam Reisker. I'm the manager of corporate reporting and projects at the CAO's office. And with me is Brenda Kelly from Assets and Project Management. And we're here to present the report. They said my name's on the report. I helped coordinate the content of the report. It's the result of input from 5 different departments. My office typically administers reports. We kind of help them flow through the public service over to clerks, but we don't usually write that many reports. But as we were discussing how to approach this one, it became pretty clear that there was a very multi-jurisdictional nature to it. There were a lot of pieces from a lot of different departments. So I took on the effort to coordinate the report, and Brenda's available for answering if there's specific technical questions, but basically the report is available. And if you'd like me to do a bit of an overview, I can provide a quick update on it for sure. So following the direction that was received, the public service looked at three basic things. Number one, the current status of the icons and what accessibility icons are currently being used in communications and in buildings. We then looked at what the best next steps would be, engaging with stakeholders and replacing the upright icon if the engagement that we do recommended that they should be replaced. And then third step being how much would that cost roughly. What we found was that the public service currently uses both types of icons in its communications and signage. We do not have a corporate-wide direction to use one icon or the other. However, Customer Service Communications, Transit Plus, and the WPA's WAVE program all use the forward-leaning icon at this time. And the upright icon is also used by transit. It's in city buildings and on street signage. So we also found that in some of these cases, such as the street signage and on transit buses, there are there are specific cases where the use of the upright icon is subject to provincial or nationwide regulation, and it is required to be used at this time. And in order to replace those signs, or those icons, we would need to have those provincial or national regulations changed. With regards to next steps, we looked at some of the costs. So stakeholder engagement is estimated to cost approximately just under $17,000. If engagement led to a corporate-wide direction to change the existing signage, the public service could either move forward with a gradual or accelerated plan for replacement. A gradual plan could be done at essentially no incremental cost to the city if it was done as signs are reaching their end of life and would be replaced anyway. We could change the graphic as it's being printed and replace it. The downside for that, of course, is that it would take an extended period of time to complete. An accelerated program where we are replacing signs before they reach their usual end of life is estimated to take at least a year to complete and would cost a minimum of $240,000 to $311,000. One note for that amount is there are some costs that we were not really able to accurately estimate, and that would be two parts. One, which would be the cost of a project manager. That cost would depend on the timeline. Generally, if we want to accelerate replacement of signs, if we want to have a very short timeline, cost would go up. If we had a more extended timeline, cost would likely go down. And the project manager cost would be part of that. Also, the city has quite a few automatic door opener buttons. They're large metal buttons for outside and inside the buildings. Those come in all sorts of different shapes and sizes, and we currently have not been able to find as of yet a vendor who has those types of replacement buttons that use the forward-leaning signage. So if there was direction to replace all of the signs, including those, we would have to look at trying to find a new vendor or someone who'd be willing to manufacture them for us. There are also some additional costs that may come up if we were replacing those buttons, issues with the doors, possibly having to replace mechanisms, things like that. So there were some costs that we weren't really able to accurately estimate at this time, but we could refine later on if we were moving forward with the project. Questions if there are.
What was the timeline for the accelerated program?
We estimated it would take at least a year to go through, and that would be sort of from the go order. If we were going to move forward with that, we'd have to secure funding, get a project manager on board, and forward with that.
And then the second option you had said,
Was
well, like how much, what's the cost differentiation in time?
the sort of the gradual replacement option would essentially be replacing signs as they would be replaced anyway, their eventual sort of end of life. So honestly, with some of the signs, especially some of the metal signs, it could be several years, it could be a decade, that some of these would just sort of be gradually replaced over time. But the costs for that would be relatively minimal because we're replacing signs as they need to be replaced anyway.
It would already be built into costs.
That's right. Yeah. The regular operating costs of replacing, an outdoor sign, we would just be able to update that. So in a similar way, customer service and communications in their digital communications, they are already using the forward leaning icon. They've been looking through and replacing icons as they find them. Of course, those are all digital. So as they find different pieces, they're replacing those. As they have printed pamphlets, they're replacing those as well. And again, there's no cost to that because it's just part of their normal operating procedure.
Good question. In terms of the utilization or deployment of this logo, Are you doing environmental scans to see which other jurisdictions might be using it as well? And what percentage those jurisdictions are using, whether it's a full implementation and rollout, whether it's partial, et cetera, et
Right.
cetera?
We did identify a few other, let's pull it up here. Locations. Part of the engagement, review. They looked at, there's a few places, Nanaimo, BC, Cambridge, Ontario, New York City. There's a few others that have, looked at as well. I haven't, looked at a more extensive one. I'm not sure I can talk to engagement, but I know the forward leaning icon has been around for about a decade now, and has been adopted, fairly broadly. In some cases, as I mentioned, there are still a few provincial regulations, and there's some national standards that are still prescribing the use of the upright logo. So it has been adopted by several cities, but there are still some sort of broader regulations that are requiring the upright one. Yeah, for sure.
If I can just add one thing. So there is a slight difference just in the communication of information over the computer compared to having the signage in buildings. So the Manitoba Building Code does use the upright sign right now. And that can partially be why it's seen both the forward leaning and the upright, just depends how it's being used. And for the city of Winnipeg, we do follow London, Ontario as another jurisdiction that is leading practice.
In what way, Brent?
So as far as its overall accessibility, not just signage, so how wide their paths might be, being able to get into buildings, how pedestrians are able to interact when there is roads or pedestrians, bikes, how their transportation is set up for people for accessibility. They are a leading city that the city of Winnipeg follows.
So this came to us as a motion from Mr. Baker, who's a member of the committee, for implementation and for community consultation, to look at a pilot. There's a lot of information here. Access is of course synonymous with a subcommittee. Is there any interest in the subcommittee looking at the report further in the committee?
I think there would be a big appetite to take a look at this
Yeah.
and have deeper conversations, particularly looking at what the practices are in London and, if that's the benchmark that the city has established, to look at that and see where things are at, for sure.
And it's interesting the juxtaposition between the report, and thank you so much for this report. And there are places that this icon is being used, like the convention center in my own ward. The recommendation that came to us in the presentation really does think to look at a gradual implementation. Clearly, the public service has added complexity to that recommendation, and that's appreciated by me. If you would like, then I think the motion would be to refer this report to the Access Subcommittee and, for further work and update to the Human Rights Committee Council. So are you willing to move that then, Angie?
Yes, I moved.
Okay, any discussion, committee? Any further discussion? If not, so moved by Angie, all those in favor?
Aye.
All right, and we'll thank, any opposed? Okay, we'll thank the public service, really appreciated. I feel another report in the public services future that is very similar. A referral coming to us from the Standing Policy Committee or perhaps EPC on age friendly. Well, I think we're jumping around. Is it time to look at the budget again? Yeah. So for those of you that received the budget in your inboxes in the intervening period, I appreciate that you're under pressure to be multitaskers in this meeting. The budget looks at, we can come back to committee and look at a budget that is different. But if I can just walk you through some of the work here, it is to look at to look at a greater contractor budget. Let's say the subcommittee wanted to delve into some more specific research, for instance, a white paper, for instance. This budget provides not only for the coordinator salary, but research, communications, logistics. You may have noticed the addition to the simultaneous interpretation that we have today. That this is a budget that lends itself to that. The Human Rights Committee meetings, subcommittee meetings that have long since had sort of Zoom and some material needs. And this budget sort of groups those needs together for some costs associated with holding the meetings. The Human Rights Dialogue and Learning Events have long since been a structure in budget. We know that we've just, gone out to community with the cafe conversation and they said more cowbell. I'm joking. They said more cafe conversations. And so this budget sort of acknowledges the dialogue and learning events. There is international work, human rights, city work, and travel associated with a human rights committee. So this budget proposes a budget for that. There's protocol, honoraria, recognition and awards and partnership events. And that's sort of a catch-all budget so that if, for instance, there's dialogue and learning events, but if there's also a budget associated with partnership events, let's say we co-host a meeting with UN Safe Cities, or we co-host with Climate Action Resilience Committee, we might want to contribute that way. Or we co-host with the Social Planning Council, or you name it. It'll provide us the ability to partner in events, including human rights related conferences that we might want to partner with. Either coming up through the subcommittees or, coming in similar like we did the grants in the past year. And then finally, the communication materials, accessibility, accommodations, and printed materials. While the city does have internal designers, recently we had some hiring related to our designers. So I sent the annual report to get designed and formatted out external. So that would provide us the ability to do that. Also, if the subcommittees and others, if we want to partner with others in promoting their printed materials or do some of our own, this would enable us to do that. So that's a preliminary look at the budget. I appreciate that you might not want to pass that today. But if you do feel comfortable passing it today, then, that's fine. You just got, some of you just received it. So we might want to move it to the next agenda, or you might want to get going with this. You let me know. Over to you for discussion. Thoughts on the budget? Ron, I'll ask you. You look pensive, or maybe you're just looking at the budget.
Well, I am looking at it. I'm just wondering if it could become more granular, or if these are sort of just like they're very categorized into these like lumps, like human rights dialogue and learning events, the total amount there. I have no opposition to the amounts, and just thinking, is there a way that there was a decision about how much would be allocated to that? Was it budgeted from previous experience? Was it based on estimated costs? Is there any wiggle room to change it if it goes over budget? Can you borrow from another line? Things like that. But I have no intrinsic opposition to the amount.
Yeah, some of it was grouped in previous budgets. I'm trying to flip to some previous budgets of the Human Rights Committee of Council, Ren, and you can do that through going into the DMIS system. For for instance, you can see, I mean, right on our agenda, you can see an attachment of the 2024 annual budget review. And you'll see the, you know, sort of contractor operational expenses, i.e. literally the coordinator's cell phone, literally the, you know, some expenses that we have. I think it's probably easier to look at previous, you know, previous budgets to show how it was just grouped and rolled up more. You're very right to point out that there is sort of this rolls up a variety of lines that some we had in budget before, some net new.
Well, maybe it leaves a little bit of wiggle room as well, so that, you know, if it's not a very granular set out line of budgets, that it can go kind of encompassing in with our grouping of it as well.
The reality too is that we routinely didn't spend the budget. And so this provides sort of budget, you know, it takes up the whole of the 125,000 budget that were allocated from council. It also, you know, budgets some of the priorities that you see in the annual plan, which is why I sort of wanted to talk about it last. So in the priorities and planning document that we have, the advancing Winnipeg as a human rights city, we have as many priorities almost as how we work that we received through that dialogue event than priorities. And some of the pieces that were prioritized had to do with increasing the communications up and out. So whether that is, you know, a billboard letting people know that there are a group of volunteer citizens like you working on human rights, or it's communication materials from the plan and priority and doing the public education involved in you know, celebrating human rights or advancing human right outcomes in this city. There is a line, essentially, Ali and I got to work saying, you know, you have a plan, but are we budgeting the plan? And so it does provide some new lines for printed materials, some new lines for partnership events and protocol. It's important to be a human rights city, and, you know, and we have, you know, we have, I think, some particular demands on us to be responsive culturally, and that is oftentimes meaning protocol and gifts. And so there's some language there to support that, and a budget, and so that, you know, we can discuss it more if you would like, and move it to the next meeting. I'm good to, you know, move it to the next meeting if you'd like, or, you know, if you want to move or anything in between. Yes.
Maybe I missed it in the explanation, but where would the Human Rights Committee come to the grants from?
Within the, well, I mean, in some cases, I'll just take a step back. In some of the budget areas that we did for dialogue, it sort of almost acts like a grant, but the protocol, recognition and awards and partnership events, the grant, we weren't really a grant giving org. There are some grants here, but it wasn't, for instance, if the chair traveled to a meeting, that was considered a grant. And that is one way of doing it. Another way is funding the travel. right? Associated with going to local government, human rights meetings, or, you know, participating locally, nationally, whether that's going to Brandon or going to, you know, going to Geneva. There wasn't necessarily a budget for it. It is fair that, you know, and then we had discrete grants. That is, if an organization asked us, like Al Weeb asked us for a grant for the homelessness and human rights that is coming up, then we'd provide, you know, that grant. And so not all grants, I would argue, were the same in budget. That's why I suggested this. I think it's a little bit, I think we've just learned over time what this budget is and could be. And in looking at the data, it, you know, like I said, it was treated like a grant, but not all grants were grants per se in the way I think you mean. Is that fair?
I was mostly referring to. We do. Website that advertises our grant process, and so I was just curious where that would fit and how much is allocated to that.
Yeah, I think there is work to do, and so I think the budget opens that door for further discussion on, you know, the plans and priorities and how that granting fits in. We certainly have the same budget allocation from council to do that. It provides us the flexibility to do that. I think it's important that we regroup around the grants and whether they're aligned, and try to align those that are coming in to plans and priorities, including because I mean, sometimes we receive grants that aren't even held in Winnipeg, or not even, you know, it is an authority that is unique to the chair and the coordinator, where we can sort of, through delegated authority from you, approve $1,000, you know, $1,000 grant, which is typically sort of what we get. And so this, you know, there is a human rights housing symposium that's coming up that I'd like to approve a grant from. But it, you know, it's neither here nor there. I do think that there is, I don't know what, I think there is merit in having a budget that is aligned with the priorities and plans. And in part, to Rand's point, this budget, I hope, reflects an effort of reverse engineering our 2024 money with the ambitions of that annual plan into some defined, you know, new areas. I do see a mistake on it, though, in reflection. There's a budget line for international work on human rights, city and travel, but it should actually read local, national, and international work. So I would ask for an amendment to this document, because it does get approved by council.
The grants, is that part of recognition and awards?
Yeah, we can make it more clear if you'd like. We can add it to human rights dialogue and learning events, or protocol honoraria, recognition, partnerships, and grants. Which one were you? You were looking at it in the protocol honoraria?
Yeah.
Yeah, okay. We can add grants to that at the bottom. Anything else?
I think the next meeting, as we work through the work plan, it would be good if we could, you know, further itemize the budget so that there's clarity about what fits into which bucket. I understand right now, we don't have those details, you know, but
I think
I
every,
suspect that might
yeah.
get fleshed out further.
yeah, every agenda, we have a budget review.
Right.
And so if you're comfortable with it going forward as amended, we'd need a motion to amend local, national, international work, human rights, city and travel. And then a motion to amend protocol honoraria recognition awards, partnership events / grants. Then for sure, we come back every meeting to dive back into budget, provide a budget update. I think that it's important to have some rigor there so that we're aligning it with,
Yes.
to your point, right, to align it with the plans and priorities, but also to get it out the door, right?
So
Um,
I'm wondering if we can approve it in 2 phases, so approve it at,
no, because this goes up to council. It's not, I mean.
got it.
Yeah, I shouldn't just say no. It goes up to council, so my recommendation would be to get an amended budget up to council.
Okay.
And then it also, as we move into the budget review, then they see that, right?
Okay,
So-
I just wanted it,
Yeah.
I just wanted to ensure that there was a mechanism where,
If you
you
want
know,
to
it's
do it in
recorded, that we're
phases,
going to break it out
Yeah.
at some point.
my recommendation would be to hold it back, but if you want to let it go, I think you know what I mean? If you wanted a phased approach in more detail, you probably would want to move it to the next agenda. It would impede ability to fund things, I think, in the between time, so it's something to think about.
So if we bring it to budget, or we bring it to council, approve an amended budget now. We revisit it at the next meeting as part of the regular process.
Yeah.
If there's amendments at that point, we could bring them, we would be required to bring them forward to council again.
Yes, but that
Okay.
just takes a motion.
Okay,
I mean, it just takes a motion and then, you know, we will have amended their budget. I think it will take further discussion with council colleagues. I think that that's important.
Right.
But it would work.
I move then to, accept the budget with the amendments to bring that forward
Council?
to council.
Yeah. And they might have thoughts too. You
Right.
know, it goes right to executive policy committee and they might have thoughts too on budget. Any discussion on the motion? All those in favor? Okay. Any opposed? That was carried unanimously, I think. Is that the end of our agenda? Oh, we have one more item.
Yes.
So we'll say goodbye to our coordinator, as we discuss her contract with things. You can stay in there if you want. Yeah, just sitting on.
Ally, we give you a glass of water. Thanks.
Well, I'll bring it back on my way back.
Yes, okay, we'll come get you. All right.
Hey, not out yet.
There's your permit.
So with these, the contract wouldn't be attached to the agenda or circulated. So all the committee would do is make a recommendation.
So, we're, in our terms of reference, we have a coordinator that is, that we contract with. That's been Ali Raposo. She has filled that position since I've been a counselor, I believe, or almost, I think, 2 years in. We need a motion to affirm the Human Rights Committee of Council Coordinator contract for 2025-2026. That's the agenda item. I'll move it open to discussion unless someone wants to move. Discussion? Do we have a mover?
Just for clarity, can I answer a question for clarity?
Yes.
So, is
I
the,
see you, Phyllis, that you'll be a mover. Thank you. Go ahead.
the contract is to when? Which date? Is it a year contract?
I
Or-
believe it's May 2024 to 2025 to 2026.
That's
I have the contract, I have moved it forward. But it is May 2025 to May 2026. The contract's typically just 1 year in duration. It can be less, it can be more, so did I answer your question or?
Yes.
Did it give rise to a new question?
Not at all. I just was curious on the timeframe.
Yeah,
Thank you.
it's important that we have a meeting in, when we do. Yeah. Any further discussion on the coordinator contract? Phyllis, thank you for moving. You're still willing to move?
Just a quick question, Counselor.
Yes.
Is it possible for you to answer whether there's been a little bit of an increase in the coordinator's salary, or is it the same as prior year?
It's the same as the previous year. There was an increase in 2025.
Okay, so that's what I was asking.
Sorry, 2024. My apologies.
Okay, so last year.
Yes.
Mhm. Okay, thank you. I appreciate that.
Any further questions?
Is there an option to increase your salary?
You can make a recommendation to increase the salary. Do you have something in mind?
You might be able to.
I'm hesitant to talk about it in public. All of Winnipeg gets to find out. I'm trying to think if she meets the threshold for the published salary, which is over 50,000. So I'll say,
Maybe to.
we don't have an in-camera feature.
No,
Um,
that only applies then.
Yeah, it only applies to SPCs. So, I mean, it's typical for, people to leave the room even though it's televised. But it is a contract. Does it become public?
Counselor, in the minutes of the Executive Policy Committee dated May
Yes.
22nd, 2024,
Okay, good.
the amount is published.
Yeah, so the amount, okay, so then read the amount.
61,200.
61,200.
Yeah. 61,200.
So are we then able to? Percentage amount?
You're the committee. Yeah, you're the committee.
So last
Yes.
year, the
Yeah.
recommendation was that the appointment include a 2% pay increase, resulting in a fee for service of 61,200 per annum, utilizing funding from the existing Human Rights Committee of Council's budget allocation. So that's the only clarification. If the coordinator's amount goes up, the overall discretionary budget for the rest of the items goes down. Yeah.
Which you've seen the budget, you've
Yes.
seen what the grouping is, so. You've just approved a budget that has room in the contracts coordinator, even temporary staff, interns, research, communications and logistics for an increase. Were you wanting to make a motion towards that end?
Like to make a motion to increase
And do you have a percentage in mind?
3%? That's standard.
I have a question. Is there comparable amounts to other coordinators of other committees? Or committees of council?
I believe she would be. I believe that the position with an allocated 3% would be among the top paid coordinators. But I can get you more information on that. That too would be in EPC's previous decisions. I can only think of two or at least one that would apply to.
Yeah, the not human rights, the Winnipeg Food Council has 2 coordinators,
Yeah.
and I don't
And they're
have that
not-
information.
Yeah, I think it's just a different
Structure?
Yeah, right, because they don't it's not their only position, I think.
Right.
So I can provide more information. So Carol, there's a motion on the floor, for a 3%, increase to the contract. You do that quick, Matt?
Yes, so that will result in an amount of $63,036.
Say it again.
$63,036.
Any discussion on the item?
I would support that motion.
Okay, any further discussion on the motion? All those in favor? Any opposed? That was carried unanimously. We could do a motion to adjourn. So moved by Clara. All those in favor? Any opposed? Thank you very much, everyone. I'll be in touch.
Thank you.
Take care.
Thank you.